Jax's revenge domain. The emergency alarm cut through the hospital like a knife. That's when you know something's really wrong in healthcare IT. I stood there watching the central monitoring station go completely dark. 847 patients across our 12-hospital network suddenly invisible to the very people trying to keep them alive. Dr. Rachel Foster came running down the hallway, her face pale as paper. "Gary, the whole system's down. We can't access patient records, medication histories, nothing. The ER just got a cardiac arrest and they're flying blind." She paused, catching her breath. What the hell happened? I knew exactly what happened. My name's Gary Patterson. I'm 49 years old, and I've been working healthcare IT for 28 years. Started as a programmer fresh out of college, worked my way up to chief technology officer. Yesterday morning, they locked me out of my own systems. Today, they're learning what that actually means. Let me back up. 20 months ago, our parent company dropped a $3.2 million system modernization project in my lap. Our patient data management infrastructure was aging badly, regulatory compliance was getting tighter, and the board was making noises about potential FDA violations if we couldn't bring everything up to current standards. They gave me full authority to redesign the entire network. Patient records, medication tracking, device integration, the works. I didn't just upgrade the servers. I rebuilt everything from the ground up. Studied every workflow, every safety protocol, every compliance requirement that keeps patients alive and hospitals out of court. The algorithms I developed weren't just database queries. They were 28 years of understanding exactly how healthcare actually works when people's lives are on the line. The first thing I did was spend time with the people who actually use these systems every day. Not the administrators, not the department heads, but the nurses who check medication orders at 3 a.m., the lab techs who run critical tests, the doctors who need patient histories in the middle of emergencies. Dr. Rachel Foster showed me how the old system created a 90-second delay every time she needed to check drug interactions. Lance Williams from Network Security explained why our backup protocols were vulnerable to exactly the kind of cyber attacks that shut down hospitals nationwide. Nobody had ever asked them before. I spent 3 months just listening, learning that our official documentation hadn't been updated in 8 years. Discovering that half our security problems came from staff creating workarounds to fix design flaws that IT management didn't know existed. These people weren't just following procedures. They were actively preventing medical disasters every single day and getting no recognition for it. The redesign took 16 months to implement. We didn't shut down any hospitals. Instead, I created a rolling upgrade system, modernizing one facility at a time while the others kept running on the old infrastructure. Every change got tested by the people who'd have to use it during actual medical emergencies. Every security protocol was explained to staff before implementation, not after they'd already been locked out of critical systems. The resistance came from middle management, not the medical staff. IT supervisors worried that empowering nurses and doctors would make their metrics-based management style irrelevant. Department heads complained that the new protocols required them to actually understand the medical workflows they were supposed to support. The old system let them manage by reports and dashboards. The new system required them to walk the floors and talk to people who save lives for a living. But the numbers don't lie. Within 6 months, system response times were up 35%. Security incidents dropped 42%. Medical errors caused by information delays decreased 28% because doctors could access what they needed when they needed it. More importantly, staff started trusting the technology. Again, when you ask someone for their expertise and then actually build systems that support their work instead of fighting it, they become invested in keeping everything running smoothly. Corporate noticed. Other hospital networks started asking for our protocols. I got invited to speak at health IT conferences. Medical journals wanted to feature our security improvements. For the first time in my career, I felt like I was building something that would last, something that mattered beyond this quarter's cost reduction targets. That's when Derek Coleman showed up. Fresh Stanford MBA, 29 years old, hired as digital strategy director to oversee what they called the final optimization phase. Corporate's idea of adding modern thinking to my project. Derek had all the buzzwords: AI-driven diagnostics, blockchain patient records, cloud-native architecture. He also had the new CFO's attention, Scott Alexander, a guy who'd been brought in 6 months earlier to modernize our technology. Approach. Scott came from the tech sector. He believed that healthcare was just another data problem waiting to be solved with the right algorithms and automation. He'd never worked in a hospital, never dealt with the reality of managing systems that can't go down when someone's having a heart attack. To him, Derek represented innovation. Young, educated, fluent in Silicon Valley terminology. I represented legacy thinking, old-school caution in a world that supposedly didn't need that anymore. Derek started attending my meetings, asking to review my architecture documentation, wanting copies of everything. Just getting up to speed, he'd say. Want to understand the technical foundation so I can identify optimization opportunities. He was polite, enthusiastic, full of praise for what I'd accomplished. I figured having leadership support couldn't hurt. The project was working, numbers don't lie, and I had nothing to hide. That was my first mistake. Derek was smart, I'll give him that. He didn't attack my results directly. Instead, he started questioning my methods. In meetings, he'd mention industry innovations that supposedly offered better approaches. He'd bring up articles about legacy systems holding back healthcare transformation, always framed as helpful suggestions, never direct criticism. But I started noticing the pattern. Every suggestion involved replacing human oversight with automated systems. Every improvement meant fewer medical professionals making decisions and more algorithms making them instead. Derek wasn't interested in optimizing what we'd built. He was interested in replacing it with something that didn't require people like me to understand healthcare. Scott ate it up. Here's this young guy with cutting-edge ideas talking about taking our improvements to the next level. Meanwhile, I'm the old-timer who's resistant to innovation. Derek made sure to position himself as the bridge between my valuable experience and next-generation methodology. What really bothered me wasn't the corporate politics. I'd dealt with that for 28 years. What bothered me was watching Derek completely miss the point. He'd walk through the hospitals with his tablet, taking notes about efficiency opportunities, but he never actually talked to the medical staff. When Dr. Foster tried to explain why certain redundant systems mattered for patient safety, Derek would nod politely and then suggest we eliminate those redundancies through AI optimization. He didn't understand that the redundancies weren't inefficiencies. They were the safety nets that kept people alive when technology failed. 2 months before the final rollout, Derek requested access to my core architecture. The board wants to understand the technical specifications, he explained. They need confidence that our approach is scalable to other hospital networks. Made sense. I gave him read-only access to the systems. I should have paid more attention to what he was actually doing with that access. Derek wasn't just reviewing my work, he was studying it like someone preparing to redesign it. He'd spend hours in the system, not just reading the code, but tracing through every security protocol, every backup procedure, every fail-safe I'd built in over nearly 3 decades of experience. When I asked about his analysis, he'd mentioned being impressed by the complexity and wanting to fully understand the architecture before proposing enhancements. 3 weeks later, he was back asking for modification privileges. Found some optimization opportunities, he said. Minor adjustments that could improve response times by another 20%. He had a presentation ready, full of charts showing projected improvements that looked impressive on PowerPoint. I should have said no. Should have asked to see his technical analysis first. Demanded to understand exactly what he wanted to change and why. But the numbers were already excellent and 20% more would make this project legendary. Plus, Derek had Scott's backing and Scott controlled next year's IT budget. I gave him the access. That's when things started going wrong. But so gradually, I didn't notice at first. Derek began scheduling early morning system reviews that I wasn't invited to. He'd hold meetings with department heads without including me. When I asked about it, he'd say he was gathering stakeholder input to ensure smooth change management. The language started changing too. In meetings, people stopped talking about Gary's architecture and started referring to the integrated platform. My security protocols became the compliance framework. The relationships I'd built with medical staff became stakeholder engagement metrics. Everything was getting rebranded with consulting speak that made it sound like anyone could have done it. Amanda Clark, our compliance officer, pulled me aside one Thursday. Amanda's been here 15 years, worked her way up from records management through pure understanding of healthcare regulations. She knows every HIPAA requirement by heart and doesn't waste time on politics. Gary, something's off. Derek's been asking questions about your fail-safes, but not normal questions. He wants to know what happens if certain backup systems get disabled. Keeps pushing scenarios where manual overrides might be unnecessary. She lowered her voice. He's also been talking about streamlined operations and reducing redundant human oversight. That phrase hit me wrong. Reducing human oversight in healthcare usually means one thing: someone's about to make changes that put patients at risk to improve efficiency metrics. What kind of scenarios is he asking about? I asked. Peak load periods, system stress tests. What happens if the audit trail functions get streamlined? What happens if the backup authentication systems run automatically without manual verification? Amanda paused. Gary, those aren't optimization questions. Those are elimination questions. That night, I stayed late to check the system logs. What I found made my blood run cold. Derek had been making changes, small ones buried deep in security subroutines, but changes nonetheless. He'd modified backup protocols, adjusted authentication sequences, and altered the manual override mechanisms that allowed medical staff to access critical information during emergencies. When I analyzed his modifications, they didn't improve anything. If anything, they introduced potential points of failure. The changes were subtle but systematic, designed to create exactly the kind of cascading security breaches that would make the whole system look unreliable under pressure. I confronted him the next morning. Derek, I noticed some modifications to the core security protocols. Can you walk me through the reasoning? He didn't miss a beat. Just some efficiency optimizations based on current usage patterns. Nothing that changes your fundamental architecture, just streamlining the execution. He pulled up a presentation I'd never seen. I've been tracking some metrics that suggest we can push performance gains even higher. The presentation was slick. Charts, graphs, projections showing 40% improvement in system efficiency. Problem was, the data didn't match what I was seeing in our actual hospitals. Some of the metrics he was citing didn't even exist in our monitoring systems. Others were extrapolated from theoretical maximums that ignored real-world medical constraints. Where did these numbers come from? Predictive modeling based on industry benchmarks and system capacity analysis. Derek clicked through slides with the confidence of someone who'd never had to explain a system failure to doctors trying to save someone's life. The architecture shows significant optimization potential if we can eliminate some current bottlenecks. By bottlenecks, he meant the safety protocols and human oversight systems that prevented medical disasters. That's when I realized what was happening. Derek wasn't trying to improve my project. He was setting it up to fail in a way that would make his solution look necessary. His modifications would cause authentication conflicts during emergencies, create bottlenecks that would look like design flaws, generate false security alerts that would make the whole system seem unstable when medical staff needed it most. When the project crashed, he'd be there with his improved version, ready to save the day with a fully automated system that didn't require people like me to understand healthcare. Scott would get his cutting-edge technology solution. Derek would get his promotion to CTO, and I'd be the legacy thinker whose outdated approach couldn't handle modern healthcare demands. The beauty of it was that I'd given him everything he needed: the system access, the technical documentation, even the credibility that came from working under my authority. He'd studied my work just long enough to know where to break it. I started building my defense that same night. First thing was backing up all my original architecture to personal servers, complete with timestamps and change logs that would prove what I'd built versus what Derek had modified. Then I started having quiet conversations with key people about what they'd observed. Jeremy Walsh, my lead systems engineer, confirmed what I suspected. Derek's been asking about system tolerance limits. What happens if security protocols get bypassed during peak loads? Says he needs to understand failure modes for risk assessment. Jeremy paused. But Gary, those aren't risk assessment questions. Those are stress test questions. He wants to know exactly how much pressure it takes to break something. Lance Williams from Network Security had his own concerns. He's been asking about incident response procedures, how quickly we can restore services if there are authentication failures during the optimization transition. Talking about bringing in outside consultants who understand modern security architectures. Lance has been protecting hospital networks longer than Derek's been working anywhere. He understands that in healthcare IT, security isn't about efficiency metrics. It's about keeping patient data safe and systems running when lives depend on it. Gary, he's planning to blame the security framework when his changes fail. Make it look like your protocols are too restrictive for modern operations. Dr. Foster had the most concerning information. Derek contacted me directly about modifying some of the redundant verification systems, wanted to know if we could streamline some of the manual override capabilities to improve workflow efficiency. I told him any changes had to go through you first. Dr. Foster and I go back 12 years. She's saved more lives than most people will ever meet. And she understands that in medicine, redundancy isn't waste. It's what keeps patients alive when primary systems fail. He didn't like that answer, started asking about replacing our medical IT oversight with a team that would be more flexible about automation standards. The picture was getting clearer. Derek wasn't just planning to sabotage my architecture, he was systematically removing every safety net, every human verification system, every relationship-based quality control that made healthcare IT actually work. When the inevitable failures happened, he'd blame outdated security requirements, resistant medical staff, and unrealistic manual protocols. Then he'd implement his solution: a fully automated system with minimal human oversight, streamlined security protocols, and consulting contracts that prioritized cost reduction over patient safety. It would look great in quarterly reports right up until someone died because critical systems failed during an emergency. 1 week before the final rollout, I got called into a board meeting. Scott was there along with Derek and 2 executives I didn't recognize from corporate. They had presentations ready, which told me this wasn't going to be a discussion. "Gary, we appreciate everything you've built here," Scott started. "The improvements have been significant. However, we've identified some concerns about the scalability of your approach." Derek took over, clicking to his first slide. "The systems Gary designed work, but they're essentially proprietary solutions. If something goes wrong, only he can fix them. That creates unacceptable risk for a multi-million-dollar healthcare operation." He walked through his presentation methodically. Charts showing my architecture as overly complex, graphs demonstrating how my approach created dangerous single points of failure, risk assessments that painted my reliance on medical staff feedback as subjective decision-making that compromised consistency. Every concern they raised was manufactured. Every risk they identified was created by Derek's modifications. But they had corporate buzzwords, colorful charts, and the confidence that comes from never having to explain a system failure to families in a hospital waiting room. "We think it's best if I take operational control for the final implementation phase," Derek concluded. "Gary can stay involved in an advisory capacity, but we need someone with fresh perspective managing day-to-day execution." I sat there watching my own project get stolen in real time. The 2 corporate executives nodded along like they understood what they were voting on. Scott looked relieved to finally have someone speaking his language. Derek looked confident, professional, ready to modernize healthcare IT. "What exactly are you planning to change?" I asked. "Nothing fundamental," Derek assured me. "Just some efficiency optimizations and compliance streamlining. The core of what you built remains intact." That was a lie, and we both knew it, but the decision was already made. They handed me a revised org chart with Derek as Chief Technology Officer, and my name moved to Senior Technical Advisor. Consulting role. No system access, no operational authority, just valuable input when requested. I should have fought harder right then. Should have demanded they examine Derek's modifications, called out the manufactured data, insisted on a technical review by people who actually understood healthcare. But I was exhausted. 20 months of 16-hour days, of caring more about patient safety than anyone else in that room, of being the only person who seemed to understand that 847 patients depended on getting this right. Part of me wanted to let someone else carry the responsibility for once. That was my second mistake. They locked me out that afternoon. Security access revoked, system credentials suspended, even my hospital parking pass deactivated. Temporary measure, they said, just while we transition operational authority. Derek walked me to my car, all fake sympathy and professional courtesy. "Don't take this personally, Gary. Your work here has been incredible. We just need to ensure continuity going forward." He paused at my driver's door. "Take some time off. You've earned it." I drove home and spent the evening looking at my backup servers, 20 months of work that was about to get twisted into someone else's career advancement. But as I sat there, something shifted in my thinking. They could lock me out of the office, but they couldn't lock me out of the relationships I'd built. The trust I'd earned with medical staff, vendors, and hospital administrators didn't get transferred just because they changed my title on an org chart. That's when I started making calls. First call was to Dr. Foster. "They locked me out," I told her. "Derek's running the show now." Her response was immediate. That's insane. He doesn't understand half of what you built. Hell, he doesn't understand a quarter of it. Doesn't matter. He's got corporate backing and a modern approach. Gary, listen to me. Hospitals run on trust, not presentations. Medical staff trust you, they don't know Derek, and they sure don't trust him with systems that keep patients alive. Second call was to Amanda. They can lock you out of the servers, she said. They can't lock you out of regulatory compliance. You know what happens when Derek's changes start causing HIPAA violations? They're going to call you, not him, and when they do, we'll document everything. Third call was to Lance. They've got a new CTO running my project now, Derek Coleman. He might be calling about security modifications. You recommending him? I'm not recommending anything, just letting you know there's been a change in leadership. Lance understood immediately. In healthcare IT, personal recommendations matter more than corporate titles. Trust gets earned over years of keeping systems secure when hackers target hospitals, and lost in minutes when someone makes changes that put patient data at risk. Derek might have Scott's authority, but he didn't have anyone's confidence. That was yesterday. Today, the whole network crashed because Derek's modifications created exactly the system failures I knew they would. The first cascade failure hit at 2:15 a.m. during night shift. By morning rounds, nothing worked. Patient monitoring systems couldn't communicate with central stations. Electronic health records were inaccessible. Even basic medication verification was down. I stayed home, let my phone go to voicemail. Derek called 8 times. Scott called 6 times. Corporate called 3 times. Dr. Foster called once with a status update, and I took that one. It's a complete disaster, she said. Derek's running around with printouts trying to figure out why the authentication systems are rejecting legitimate medical access. His optimization protocols are conflicting with our emergency override systems. Medical staff can't access patient records during actual medical emergencies. What's Derek saying? That it's a temporary integration issue that will be resolved shortly. Problem is, his modifications disabled our diagnostic capabilities too. The system can't even tell us what's wrong, let alone how to fix it. Dr. Foster paused. Gary, people are scared. Patients are asking if their medical records are safe. Doctors are wondering if they should transfer critical cases to other hospitals. I hung up and drove to the coffee shop across from our main hospital campus. Same table by the window where I used to work during the implementation phase. Perfect view of the emergency entrance and the main parking structure. By 9 a.m., it was chaos. Ambulances backing up because the ER couldn't access incoming patient information. Medical staff standing around looking frustrated because they couldn't verify medication allergies or check treatment histories. The night shift supervisor was outside chain smoking and talking on his phone, probably explaining to his family why he couldn't come home yet. Medical professionals were gathering in small groups near the main entrance. Some were checking personal devices, others just talking quietly with the kind of concern you see when people realize the technology they depend on to save lives isn't working. My phone buzzed. Text from Jeremy. Derek's asking if you left any hidden documentation that might explain the system failures. I told him I'd pass along the message. Another text from Lance. Medical staff asking if you're coming back. They want to know if they should be worried about patient safety. And then the call I was waiting for. Scott, sounding nothing like the confident executive from last week's meeting. Gary, we need to talk. There are some technical issues with the rollout that require your expertise. I'm not involved in operations anymore. Remember, this is temporary, just until we stabilize the systems. What systems? I don't have access to any systems. A pause. In the background, I could hear alarms, urgent voices, the sound of expensive medical equipment sitting idle when patients needed it most. We can restore your access immediately. Emergency authorization. I let that sit for a moment. What kind of emergency? The network's been down for 8 hours. We're losing patient safety protocols. Medical staff can't access critical information during emergencies. Derek says the issues are related to some legacy configurations that weren't properly documented. Legacy configurations. That's what they were calling my architecture now. Derek made modifications to the core security protocols without understanding the medical dependencies. The failures aren't bugs, they're features of his changes. Another pause. Can you fix it? That was the question I'd been waiting for. Not, will you help us? Not, what would you recommend? But can you fix it? Because they already knew I was the only one who could. Maybe. I'd need full system access, operational authority, and written confirmation that no one makes changes without medical safety review. Done. How quickly can you be here? I'm not sure I want to be there. Derek's got this handled, right? Fresh perspective, modern approach, all those optimization protocols. The silence stretched long enough that I could hear background noise from the hospital. More alarms, someone giving urgent instructions that couldn't be followed because the systems weren't responding. Gary, please just get here. I finished my coffee and drove across the street. The security guard who'd been instructed to keep me out yesterday waved me through without checking credentials. Funny how medical emergencies clarify priorities. Derek was waiting in the lobby looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. His presentation folder was tucked under his arm, but nobody was asking for optimization metrics anymore. Thank God you're here. I think there might be some compatibility issues between your original architecture and some efficiency improvements we implemented. Efficiency improvements. I almost laughed. For the next 12 hours, I walked him through every modification, explaining how each change created cascading failures throughout the medical network. It wasn't malicious sabotage, it was just ignorance. Derek understood business optimization, but he didn't understand healthcare reality. He treated patient data systems like consumer apps that could be improved with better algorithms, not realizing that medical IT is life-critical infrastructure where human oversight prevents disasters. The fixes took 14 hours to implement properly. Not because they were complicated, but because I had to undo all of Derek's optimizations while explaining why each safety protocol existed. He took notes like a medical student, asking questions that showed he'd never really understood what healthcare IT actually involves. By evening shift, the network was running smoothly. By the end of the week, we were operating better than before Derek's improvements. Medical staff relaxed, patient safety protocols resumed normal function, and the emergency departments returned to their usual controlled chaos of saving lives. The board meeting happened the following Monday. Different atmosphere this time. The two corporate executives who'd nodded along with Derek's presentation were notably absent. Scott started with an apology and ended with an offer. Executive Vice President of Technology and Operations, 35% salary increase, direct report to the board, and authority over a $5.8 million next-generation platform development. Derek got reassigned to systems analyst, reporting directly to me. Learning opportunity, they called it. Chance to understand healthcare from the ground up under experienced guidance. I accepted both offers. For the next 8 months, Derek worked under my supervision, learning what medical IT actually involves. Not the theory from business school, but the reality of managing systems that keep people alive, maintaining HIPAA compliance under federal scrutiny, and earning trust from medical professionals who've seen too many technology failures put patients at risk. He turned out to be a decent analyst once he stopped trying to disrupt everything. The network's running at 145% of baseline efficiency now. Corporate's implementing our protocols at 8 other hospital systems. I've got budget authority for the $5.8 million expansion that'll improve patient safety across 18 hospitals and integrate with 4 new medical research facilities. People ask if I regret not just walking away, letting Derek's incompetence destroy everything and proving my point. But here's what I learned. The best revenge isn't watching someone fail. It's being so essential that their failure becomes impossible to ignore, then using that leverage to build something better. They didn't just lock me out of my project, they locked themselves out of competence. When I came back, it wasn't as the guy who saved the day. It was as the guy they couldn't afford to lose again. That's the kind of victory that lasts. In the end, they thought they were replacing me with someone cheaper and more innovative. What they actually did was replace medical expertise with business ambition, and discovered that ambition without knowledge is just expensive ignorance that puts patients at risk. The real lesson isn't about corporate politics or workplace betrayal. It's that true expertise can't be stolen, only earned through years of understanding what actually matters. And in healthcare, what matters is keeping people alive, not optimizing quarterly reports. Looking back, the whole experience taught me that sometimes the best way to fight corporate politics isn't to play their game. It's to be so good at what you do that when everything falls apart, you're the only one who can put it back together. In the end, you can't fake 28 years of experience with 2 years of MBA courses and a PowerPoint presentation. The difference between knowing how to talk about something and actually knowing how to do it becomes very clear when lives are on the line.